Okay, hello, welcome everyone this morning. I hope you had a great Easter. My name's Sarah. I'm going to introduce Catherine Spencer in just a minute to do the hazard reporting training today. This webinar is going to be recorded, so we'll send you a link later today. And if you want to ask any questions, there's a Q&A panel down below. And I'll also put a link to the webinar next week, which is on record notifications in the chat panel. So over to you, Catherine. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for joining the session this morning, especially with it being the first one of the day after the long weekend. The session this morning is essentially an opportunity for people who are familiar with the hazard module within myosh to maybe ask some questions that you might have surrounding it, and really just to go through the functionality of using the module. Hazards are independent as a module, so you can have hazards within your environment within work where employee may have identified a hazard. They can log that completely independent. However, there are many situations where hazards will form as a linked record within other modules within myosh. So for example, coming out of an incident report, there might be a hazard analysis, so we can link hazards into that. Also within inspections as well. So what we're going to do is walk through the functionality. At various stages of this functionality, what I'll do is I'll just stop and open it up to see if there are any questions. So you should notice within your Zoom window, there should be like a little menu bar, and within that menu bar, there'll be a Q&A section that you can just click on and post your question in there. So we're in the demo environment today, and I'll just select new record. And we'll just expand that across the record list. So as always, when we go into a new hazard record, the hierarchy will be collapsed. So if I just expand it, what you're going to see is it populated with the hierarchy values for the person that's logged in. What we'll do next is complete the reporting details. Now, those of you who are current existing users of myosh, you may find that you've got slightly different functionality in here. And as you'll be aware that there is a customizable configuration element to this product. So what we'll select first of all is the accountable. Accountable is going to be the person who's responsible for ensuring that the hazard controls are put in place. It populates automatically with the name of the person who's logged in, although what you'll see is that you'll get a list of all other users in your system to choose from. Date reported populates with today's date, and you can use the date selector to navigate if it's a retrospective entry. As we move further down, the important thing for the person who's logging the hazard to include is going to be some hazard classification information. So we're just keeping in mind that the person who's logging this hazard can be any level of access. So it could be your admin all the way down to a user, which is the most restricted level of access. So we'll just place in a brief description. We can select a type. The list that we see here is all being configured for us within this demo environment. Depending on your business, you'll be able to choose other selections. And what I might do for now is we'll just leave that one blank, and then the person who's logging the hazard would also include a little bit more information in addition to that brief description. Stakeholders can be selected from this list. This is going to point to all of your user list, and you can pick out anybody who may, in addition, just be needing to be noted within this Just be aware, and that was the reason I hesitated there, by default, it doesn't have any kind of notification built into it. So by selecting a couple of these users here, it simply is just including it within the hazard itself. You can, however, go into your record notification, and if you want to build in some kind of notification to stakeholders, that can be included also. As we move down the form, the next step would be to capture what the control strategy is. So it might be initially that just some administration is done, maybe isolation. Temporary controls, they can be listed in here. And although we can see the controls text box, it's likely that at the initial stage, the person would just be capturing what those temporary controls are. We'll fill in all those other fields at a later date. However, you'll see that the treatment due date, depending on business requirements, it might be something that you choose to make mandatory, and then you can just place in a date for the controls to be administered. Any estimated cost can go in there also, and just be aware that you do have to just place in the actual numeric value. You can't place in any character symbols. As we move to our next section, we have analysis and evaluation. So again, I suppose depending upon the level of the person in relation to health and safety that is recording this information, they may not feel that comfortable with recording and capturing who is most affected. However, there is a requirement for them to complete the initial risk rating. This, of course, can be re-evaluated by the person who's been assigned as accountable. So I'll just select one from this list, and the residual risk would be captured as soon as we place the controls in. So we'll leave that one for now. As we move down the form, there are associated actions that can be linked to this. So we can go into log new and then capture an action as required. At this stage of the process, what I'm going to do is just leave it blank, and we'll continue moving down the form. The review and monitoring section is typically left until it goes to the accountable person. However, what you'll notice is that we have got this comments, and it indicates that it's a mandatory requirement. So in here, there would just be any supplementary information recorded that is going to help the accountable person. The very bottom of the form, we have the attachments. So if there are any images, any photographs, or perhaps any work orders, you'll be able to attach them to the hazard. Next step would be to select submit. Using the submit is going to progress it from a draft workflow status to an open hazard. It also sends a notification to the person who is listed at the very top in the accountable. If we were to select save, it's simply going to keep it in draft status and nobody is notified. Let's select submit. And at this stage, what I'm going to do is just open it up to see if there are any questions that we have.
I don't think that we have any questions at the moment, Catherine.
Thank you. All right, so next step in the process is the accountable person has received a notification that there's a hazard that's been logged in the system. So what they're going to do is go into myosh. The notification itself that they receive will give them a link to go directly to the hazard. So if we open the hazard, select edit. So at this stage, what they can do is review all of the details that have been captured so far. They can, at this stage, if required, select the type of hazard that has been recorded. And in addition, they would then be able to add whatever measures that they're going to put in place to reduce the hazard risk. So it might be that they then select additional control strategy items and then list all of the controls that have been put in place. Any additional comments can go in the treatment comments. So it could be something about there might be a review in a 3-month period regarding, or it might be that the same issue occurs within other parts of the building. So anything that's required can go into those comments. As we move further down in the analysis and evaluation, we would select the residual risk now that the controls have been put in place. And if we wanted to associate an action, we can choose Log New. So let's say that this one is going to be used so that we can actually review this situation in a few months' time. Once we select Submit, the person who we've marked as assigned to will receive a notification regarding that particular action, along with the accountable, who will also receive a CC. So we've now linked this action to the hazard. At any stage and throughout all of the myosh modules, you can actually have it so that an action can remain open, even though essentially we can reduce the risk in this particular hazard record so that it's no longer active. We can perhaps notify the reporting person, which is good practice. If somebody has identified a hazard throughout the business, it's always encouraging to let them know the status of that risk. We'll place in a review date for later on in the year. And then any other comments would need to be captured. You'll see at the bottom we've got 2 options so that this will change the status of the hazard from open. We can either reduce it to eliminated, or we can change it to saving it as a LARP. And as you can see, if you hover over that button, it's as low as reasonably practicable. Okay, so that's the full life cycle of the hazard. We should now be able to see it if we were to change the status. So let me just look at some of the options that we've got. So it looks like status is just along here. Also, what we've got in here as well are other different indicators that have been added in. So it just helps to identify straight away the status of the hazard. So always little coloured indicators, they can be added to your environment as needed. Okay, so are there any questions. It looks like one has come through.
Yeah. Can task type be changed?
Yep, absolutely. So task types can be changed. If I just go into this particular record. So within the myosh Viking environment, it would be better actually if I just go into a new record, it's easier. All of the administrators within your system will have the ability to update any of these list items. So you'll be able to go into the form workflow and change those as necessary. The final step with your hazards is likely to be looking at some kind of statistics and reports. So we can either use the record list, which will enable us to, you can either export the data that you require, or you can go to your dashboard where you'll be able to see some charts. So I think the main thing to be aware of with your record list is, first of all, the filters that you can apply. So you can, perhaps if you just wanted to look at anything that was reported by a particular person, we can apply that filter. Of course, we can apply additional filters as needed. Anything that we don't see from the default list, we can check in the optional record list items so that we can include those additional headings. If we wanted to export that data, we've got the option of it going into PDF or Excel. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with using saved views, but these can be quite useful to use. So if you wanted to save a view that always just gave you the hazards that are applicable to yourself, you can select that save view. And you'll see that up in the user view at the top. And if we select default, that takes us back to all of the hazards that have been recorded. Let's have a look at the dashboard. And if we go into our hazards tab that we've got set up, then you'll be able to see we've got a selection of hazards by status, by type. If I select one of the segments, so let's have a look at this one here. Sorry, I was a little bit quick there. You can see what it will do is it will link the records that fall within that particular category, and we can select one of the records and it's going to open up in a separate tab the actual hazard that's associated. So you can really drill down and find out exactly what those records relate to. Same with the actual hazards by site and status. You can click onto the Mount Bryant. And again, we can select a record if needed. Can we change the risk level score platform? By that, do you mean your risk matrix? And if that's the case, absolutely. So it might be that you need to speak to the support team regarding getting a quote to change that. But yes, we can install anybody's risk matrix into the system. And that's for both classic and custom customers.
There's another question. Oh, no, it's a thanks.
No problem. The hazard module itself is very user-friendly. We're looking at it from the desktop perspective. There is, of course, the mobile app as well, which businesses encourage staff out in the field to use. So it's equally as user-friendly and enables people to just capture a hazard that they've identified in very quick and easy steps. If there are no other questions that are coming through, appreciate we've got through this a lot quicker than anticipated. If there are any other questions, Sarah's going to send a link to the video, and feel free to get in touch with us and we can help further.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. I've just sent a link to the webinar next week, which is on record notifications. So yes, I'll send an email out today with this recording so you can share that with other people in your organisation. And that's it, Catherine?
Yeah, we're done. Thank
Good.
you, everyone.
All right. Thank you for joining us today. Bye.
Thanks.